Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. Now, it should be of no surprise that businesses around the world are cutting costs amid this looming recession that seems impossible to avoid right now. And that means everything from hiring freezes to trimming headcount to those difficult decisions that are already being made and difficult conversations around cancelling, tightening contracts, etc. But today's guest is Kraig Swensrud, and he wants to give a lesson on the hardest questions he's getting in the sales and renewals conversations right now and how to handle them. But he's also got an inspiring tech startup story to share too, because Kraig has led 2 companies through acquisition and is currently the CEO of Qualified, which, although has raised $95 million this year for their Series C round, even with an average 4,000 ROI across customers too, Kraig is still having to navigate customers trying to cut costs. So there's a lot that we can talk about today. Today's podcast is brought to you by our friends at Nextiva and their new Nextiva One system. Have you ever searched endlessly for the conversations thread that you've had with a client or co-worker, only to check 5 apps and still not have the information that you need to complete the task at hand? I'm sure you have, and unfortunately this is the case for many people in the workforce. But luckily, Nextiva One aims to end this painful process once and for all with what they are calling threaded conversations. Threaded conversations let you see the entire call and messaging histories with others, regardless of the tool that you use to communicate, giving you the power to take back your workday and amaze your customers and team. So simplify your business today and get your Nextiva One communication system by simply visiting nextiva.com/techtalkdaily. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening, it's time for me to beam your ears directly into San Francisco, where Kraig is waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. My name is Kraig Swensrud. I'm the CEO and founder of Qualified.com. We are a software company, B2B software company. We're a pipeline generation platform for B2B sales and marketing teams.
And we were talking before we started recording today about your glorious backdrop. You're in San Francisco, living the tech dream there. But can I take you back for a moment? Can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or just a moment that possibly put you on the path you're on today?
It's a really interesting question. You know, for me, I look back and, you know, I'm from Generation X. And so I really was in school, in elementary school, kind of like, 10 years old. And we had a computer in our classroom. And my mom particularly sought after the type of school where I grew up in San Diego, California. It was called a magnet program. And there was like a computer class. And every single student had an Apple computer. And, at that time, that was like mind blowing, actually. That was not normally the case. And so I actually took computer programming class when I was like 10 years old. And that was the start of my interest in technology. And that was the start of my interest in software. And then it wasn't sort of by design, but I ended up going to college at UC Berkeley, which is right across the bay from where I am right now in San Francisco, which also has a phenomenal computer science program. And I just happened to graduate from university at a time when the web, came to be. And so it's like I got a job right out of school at Oracle, which was at the time the second largest enterprise software company. And I learned the ropes kind of from the ground up. And so if I look back at my experience, it's like I was born for the software industry.
Yeah. And it's incredibly cool because I'm a fellow Gen Xer myself, and I always think it's incredibly cool that we've been able to be on this journey from the very beginning, and we've seen the early computing, how it developed into websites, the internet, and online gaming, and so much more. Now we're going to blockchain, crypto. It's like we've been on the whole journey. But I'm curious, are you grateful that you've been on that whole journey, or is there a side of you that thinks, "Oh man, I was born too early"? Which side of the fence would you go on?
I think it was incredible, because so many times that when you're trying to understand something, or you jump into an industry and you don't understand the history, and especially with technology, understanding the history of why are things like they are. Yeah. And you have seen the evolution of computing, and you've seen the evolution of the web, and you've seen the evolution of websites, and you've seen the evolution of cloud computing, and then social media, and then mobile phones, and on and on and on, the Internet of Things and Web3 and crypto. And when you can track it all, sometimes it helps you understand why are things the way they are, and therefore maybe that helps you spot opportunities for developments and opportunities to build companies. And that's kind of what I've done my whole career. Is I've been looking as an entrepreneur and a founder for the opportunities and the pockets for where things can be improved in the world. And I've applied my personal passions and my background to those to try to build companies.
But of course, it was that path that led you to Qualified. So can you tell me more about the story behind the company and the problems that you set out to solve with technology?
Yeah. So Qualified is a B2B software company that helps other businesses generate pipeline. And so let me explain a little bit to your audience, if they're not familiar, what is pipeline. So for most consumer technology companies, most consumer companies generate revenue either through like retail stores or e-commerce websites and things like that. But many business-to-business organizations generate revenue through large human-based direct sales organizations. And so if you have a human-based sales organization and you're trying to sell, you need what's called pipeline, or leads that are like kind of sales opportunities for you to work that hopefully you can generate revenue. And so the journey kind of Qualified starts back when I was the chief marketing officer of a huge enterprise tech company called Salesforce. And as the chief marketer at Salesforce, this was about 10 years ago, one of the things that I owned was the inbound pipeline number, right? All the kind of the leads that were the fuel to generate sales for our sales organization. And when I missed the pipeline number one quarter, the CEO's finger came pointing at me, of course. And I was the chief marketer at, one of the world's largest enterprise software organizations, maybe the greatest enterprise marketing organization on the planet. And I missed my number. And when the CEO's finger came pointing at me, my answer was, when he said, why, my answer was, I don't know. I was like, I don't actually know. I can tell you what happened, a month ago, but as things were changing and as the quarter was evolving, I couldn't see the data in real time. So I had no visibility into what was actually happening with my marketing campaigns, how many of those campaigns were driving traffic to my website, how many of those people were kind of filling out forms, which turned into the leads to feed my sales organization. I could see the historical data, but I couldn't see it in real time. So I felt like I was flying a plane without any real-time gauges. So it felt like I was flying blind. And that was a word that I used to my team at the time. They always teased me. They said, Kraig's running around the floor saying he's blind again. But like that problem of you can't see what's happening in real time. And when you're responsible for this huge number that's so important to a company, the pipeline and revenue number, and you miss the number and you don't know why, that problem stuck with me. And that was really the impetus of what helped me kind of create Qualified. And so let me explain a little bit about what Qualified is we're a modern kind of pipeline and revenue generating system. So in the past, if you're a B2B technologist out there, you probably understand the fact that you spend a lot of money on digital advertising and programs. Most of that advertising is designed to drive traffic to your website, even if it's a billboard or a commercial or a radio ad. Certainly all of your digital ads and email campaigns, they drive traffic to your website. And most companies put up forms that say, hey, want to talk to us? Raise your hand. Want a consultation? Raise your hand. Fill out this form. We'll get back to you later. And I just thought, man, that is so antiquated. If you don't know who's there and which companies they're from and what they're doing and what they're interested in, you are flying blind, literally. So we created a new platform for B2B companies to generate more pipeline from their website. It's called the Pipeline Cloud, and that's fundamentally what we do.
And so much has, you mentioned the story there about 10 years ago, and so much has changed in the world, again, in just the last 2.5 years alone. So right here in 2022, and we're looking forward to 2023, why do you think the old B2B pipeline generation process is broken? Is that problem, or those set of problems you just mentioned there, has that just exacerbated in recent years?
It has been. I think that the pandemic has, number one, forced every B2B sales and marketing organization to go digital. So many things that we all used to do in B2B sales and marketing. We used to go to trade shows like we were talking about, and we used to host conferences and executive dinners and sales teams used to fly on planes and meet customers in boardrooms. And the pandemic just put a stop to all of that. And to some degree, it's been like a permanent change because companies were forced for a few years to think like, I need to continue to operate. I need to continue to sell. How do I do that using technology? And so that is kind of ushered in technologies like, my company, qualified.com, and so many others. And that's produced a relatively permanent change that we all now feel so comfortable operating in the digital world. Not that it's going to be 100%. Sales teams largely aren't flying around on planes anymore. They're conducting sales meetings, using technologies like Zoom and Google Meetings and, Teams and things like that. And so I think that's provided an opportunity for companies like ours. It's not 100% a permanent change, but the pandemic and now kind of this recession we're coming into has caused companies to rethink, how am I doing things? Because take, for example, what's happening in the world right now. You've had kind of the bursting of the tech bubble this year. You've had rising interest rates around the world. We kind of have these looming fears of, recession on the horizon. Nobody knows what 2023 is going to bring. And that's caused companies to tighten spending. CFOs have cracked down. And so as a result, sales and marketing teams are thinking like, well, how do I do things differently? How do I capture more demand that's coming to me? What are the latest technologies that are out there to help me grow, even though it's a tougher environment? So I think some difficult environments actually help younger tech companies succeed. In fact, we have a lot of evidence through the dot-com boom and bust and the great, financial crisis of 2008, 2010. Some of the greatest companies were actually born during those times.
They really were. And the fact that there's, 5,000 miles difference between us right now. We've got the same things going on both sides of the pond. The economic climate, businesses are being challenged to do more with less. And the first thing that they start looking at is, I don't know, how many third parties, intermediaries can we actually cut back on? And I'm curious, from all the conversations that you're having with your customers all around the world, what are the hardest questions that you're getting at the moment, especially in terms of sales and renewals conversations right now?
Yeah, we are a SaaS, a software as a service company. So we not only are focused on sales, but also, as you mentioned, renewals as a subscription company. Yeah. And, if I were to say one thing, it's that because companies are tightening their spending and because CFOs are cracking down on spend, that sales and renewals conversations, they need to be all about ROI, or return on investment. And in order to get deals done today, you have to be able to prove the ROI of your solution. In our case, we're a software company, so we need to be able to prove. And that starts with like a model at the beginning to say, hey, if you put in $1 of investment into this piece of software, you're going to get $2 back within the first year. And so that starts with a model saying this is what we believe is going to happen. But then you, as far as renewals go, you have to be able to prove that. And that is really hard for so many technology companies. Luckily, we're a pipeline generation platform, so we can directly prove pipeline and revenue. That's not so easy for so many tech companies, but return on investment is the name of the game right now.
And just to bring to life some of the things you're talking about there, do you have any examples or use cases of how you're helping your customers turn some of these challenges that everyone's experiencing right now and transforming them into opportunities? Is there any examples that spring to mind there?
Yeah, so there's if you think about what sales teams need, there's a common term in our industry called pipeline coverage, which simply means if I need to generate $1 of revenue, how many dollars in new sales opportunities do I need? Because I'm not going to be able to close them all. Historically, in our industry, that number was 3x. So everybody talked about a 3x pipeline coverage. I need $3 in pipeline to close $1 of revenue. Because it's harder for sales teams to close deals in today's environment, it's harder because of all the things that we talked about, the kind of looming fears of the recession and CFOs cracking down on spend. Companies now need that number 3x to be more like 5x. And they don't have the additional marketing funds to just keep spending money to generate more opportunities for their sales team. So they have to become more efficient. And typically that means become more efficient with all of the demand that's coming to you and to be able to capture more of the demand that's coming to you. Now, where is that demand coming for most B2B organizations, it's coming to their website. So for example, if you think about the last, radio commercial that you heard, or from a B2B company, sometimes they're on television, but mostly you see them on LinkedIn. Mostly you see them on kind of Google display advertising. Mostly you see them when you're reading blogs and listening to podcasts and things like that. And all of that is potential demand that drives traffic to a website. So that's a real world example of how companies are using kind of modern software to make it happen.
And I've got to say, kudos to you guys as well, because there is a lot of doom and gloom out there. We're talking about the economic climate. But before you came on the podcast today, I was reading that you raised something like $95 million in a Series C round. So can you tell me more about that? And what does that funding mean to you and your team at Qualified and indeed your customers?
Indeed, we did raise a $95 million funding round earlier this year. And really, simply put, what that means to us, I believe, is like the faith that so many investors have in software and solutions like ours, even during a very difficult time. Because I think that that every investor knows that, like, who's going to thrive during this period of time. It's companies who can make their customers more successful and quantifiably prove that in terms of top line growth. So that's kind of the why behind the round. And what it really means to us is that it means that we have the capital now to grow really intelligently. And for so many technology companies, I was looking back at the entire the cast that's been on your show, and it's like spectacular. But as we all know, for the past number of years, maybe even the last decade, it was all about growth. Yeah. That's all anybody wanted to talk about, was how fast are you growing? And now the tides have turned, and now for technology companies, it's all about efficient growth. What is the cost of generating another dollar of revenue? And can your business be sustainable? And that means becoming cash flow positive, or that means generating cash flow or generating profits. And so that's now the focus. And so we have this funding that we received this year, and we are, using that to grow intelligently and smart. As we look forward into the future, times are uncertain. They're as uncertain as they have been in recent years. We had COVID, and that was a very uncertain time that benefited a lot of technology companies. And now we have kind of the looming fears of this recession on the horizon. So we want to use this capital to be smart. We want to make sure that we can get through any period of time, and that we can thrive because we're spending that money extremely intelligently.
Fantastic. And of course, we started the podcast today talking about your origin story and the incredible journey you've been on. And I should highlight here, this is not your first rodeo. Well, you've had I think you've led two companies through acquisition, and obviously now you're the CEO of Qualified. So for any startup founders listening, maybe at the very beginning of their journey, or maybe going through a few hard times, or looking for just a nugget of information or advice, what would you say is the biggest lesson or biggest lessons that you've learned along the way?
As a startup founder or any entrepreneur, no matter how much success you've had, when you're just trying to get a business going, it's all about accepting advice, talking to as many people as possible, getting perspective. And the very first challenge any entrepreneur faces is, how do I get momentum? Like, maybe I can build a product, maybe I can, get it in the hands of a few customers, but how does my business really gain momentum? And in order to gain momentum as an entrepreneur, what you really need is, you need to take all the people inside of your company, which is the most important thing, are the people that you have, and make sure that everybody is aligned. And I have built two successful businesses that have had successful exits, but in my journey here with Qualified, I've had to get the company through the pandemic, and now we have the bursting of the technology valuation bubble, and now we have looming fears of recession, and it's a very challenging time. So how do we navigate a company through these challenging times? And it's all about alignment. And that's how we get momentum, is through every single person in the company pushing in the same direction every single day. So at our company, we use an alignment framework that was popularized by Mark Benioff at Salesforce, called the V2 MOM. It stands for vision, which is where are we going; values, which is what's important to us as people as we go on this journey; methods, which are what are the priorities of the company on any given day or any given quarter, obstacles, which is we got to think about what's going to stop us from achieving our goals, and measures, which are like, what are the numbers, the hard numbers that say, are we successful or not in what we're trying to achieve? And this kind of very simple framework is really helpful to align the company when you're 5 people or 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people. And obviously Salesforce now uses it and they're nearing 100,000 employees. And so that's what we use here at Qualified. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned is the greater alignment you have between the company and all the employees, it makes everybody feel like they kind of own the outcome. It lets everybody in the company know the stuff I'm working on today, how is that going to contribute to the success or the failure of the company? And so alignment is so key to generating momentum, which is so key to getting a business off the ground.
Wow, what an answer. Absolute gold packed into that response there. Hopefully that will inspire people listening all around the world. Because if we're honest, if any of us spend more than 10 minutes watching TV, doom scrolling down our smartphone, you can convince yourself that it's too dangerous to leave your house and the business is doomed and there's an uncertain future ahead. But to restore the balance in the universe, what excites you about the road ahead and what's next for you? And is there anything that makes you hopeful for the future or, as I said, excites you?
The thing that excites me really is the continued opportunity for the software industry. And there's so many things that you talk about and so many guests you bring on your show. But, I've been squarely in the software industry since, like I said, since I was like 10 years old, and where I feel like I was born for the software industry. And, over the course of my career, I've watched the software industry come to be. I've seen it disrupt industries. I've seen it transform positively companies. It's absolutely credible. And now we have cloud computing and software as a service. And maybe, I think I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to have had the experiences that I've had. I'm so lucky to have been kind of in the right place at the right time. And I'm so lucky maybe to be in the best industry in the history of the world. And so I'm always optimistic for the future of the software industry. I think there's so much more that's going to happen over the coming decades. And I'm just excited to be part of it.
Now I've got you in an excited kind of mood. I'm going to ask you to share your favorite song, maybe, or a song that has inspired you or means something to you, helps you get your head into the zone, that we can add to our Spotify playlist where a guest leaves a song too. All I'm going to ask is, what are you going to leave us with? And is there a reason behind that choice too?
Something that gets my head into the zone right now. Yeah. I am listening to In the Air Tonight by the legendary Phil Collins, because if you put on that track and you turn down the lights and you just listen to it, it is all about getting your head in the game and the opportunity that lies before you. So that's what I'm listening to on my Spotify right now.
Awesome. I'll get that added to our Spotify playlist. I've got to ask though, when you sat in that dark room and you're playing that song, can you stop the urge of playing air drums or do you just go for it?
It's all about the drum solo. It is all about the drum solo. So what a great track and what a great artist.
Absolutely. And before I let you go, for anyone listening that just wants to find out more information about Qualified, any of the topics we talked about today, or even contact a member of your team, what's the best starting point for everything?
Yeah, the best way is to have a conversation right on our website at qualified.com. And during business hours, of course, we have people there to talk to everybody live right on our website. So please join us at qualified.com.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me today and not just talking about this incredibly important topic, especially at a time when businesses across the US, UK, Europe, and indeed the whole world are cutting costs amid the looming recession. And so much going on there. But I love how you're turning that into opportunities for your customers. But more than anything, just for sharing your origin story that started with that Apple PC back in San Diego back in the day. So just a big thank you for taking the time to share that with me today.
Thanks for having me on the show, Neil. Really appreciate it.
What a cool guy, and what an amazing podcast voice too. I've officially got podcast voice envy listening to Kraig there. He just sounded fantastic and spoke so much sense and delivered so much gold there. And there has been so much talk about big tech laying people off, reducing recruitment, along with tricky sales and renewals conversations. But I'm curious, you've heard from me here in the UK, you've heard from Kraig 5,000 miles away from me in San Francisco, but you are all scattered around the world in 165 different countries. And I want you to be my eyes and ears and tell me, hey, what's the word on the street? Because the podcast is not about me speaking the gospel from my podcast chair in my home or being a keyboard warrior. I don't have the answers to everything, and nobody does. But together, we can make a lot more sense from what's happening out there. So the reason I started this podcast 7 years ago was to get as many different voices, opinions, insights, experiences, etc. as possible onto this show. So as always, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, just at Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. We'll keep this conversation going, and hopefully together we can make a little more sense of this crazy world in which we all reside. But that's it for today's episode. So a big thank you to Kraig for coming on here, and even bigger thank you to each and every one of you for tuning into the podcast. And until next time, don't be a stranger.